Do you see the biggest risk when it comes to actually policy from central banks, the European Central Bank, the fact that they're behind the curve, they could stay well behind the curve when there's a possible recession in the US?
I personally don't see them as being behind the curve. We clearly do not have 2% inflation on trend in the EU yet. So I think that their decision to postpone the first rate cut into the second half of 2019 is an imminently sensible one. And also there are lots of structural things going on which, of course, also influence monetary policy in addition to the data flow. And one big issue is, of course, internet, if I can use that word to encompass almost everything, which I think is still going to exert downward pressure on inflation going forward, so allowing central banks to keep their rates low. And of course, lurking in the background are the high debt levels, which is an issue in the Eurozone, where some countries obviously would not live very well with much higher interest rates. So I think that the ECB is doing a pretty phenomenal job.
Do you agree with that, Patrick?
Yeah, I don't think they're behind the curve. They're lagging the US, but the economy is about 4 years behind the US. So I think their interest rates policy is appropriate for the whole of the Eurozone, not appropriate for the north of Europe, which is creating different phenomena in Northern Europe assets. But for where the economy is, I think the guidance they're giving is about right now.
Marie, do you worry about the politics in Europe? So we're getting some reforms a little bit later on from France on labor. Italy, when it comes to labor reforms, seem to have gotten back to something where it's workers' rights more than business-friendly policies. And then you still don't know exactly how this, Angela Merkel saga on immigration ends up.
Absolutely. I mean, we see a reaction all over the world. This is not a particular European phenomenon. Almost everywhere you look, you can see an increase in nationalism and populism. And this is very much a reaction to, you could say, if you have to choose one variable, the growing income inequality. So perhaps it's surprising that this is taking this shape in Europe, where actually income equality is greater than anywhere else bar Scandinavia. But how do you address this? And you clearly address it through structural reforms, and it's hard to do structural reforms in the current climate. And they have actually, structural reforms have slowed everywhere. They peaked in 2014 in mature countries and in 2015 in emerging economies, and this does not really bode well for potential GDP growth going forward.